This is my best and worst of my plants in 2024. Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Efe. I'm growing loads and loads of plants in my 2-bedroom apartment here in the heart of New York City. I thought it would be only fair to do a roundup of which plants thrived and which ones struggled, which of them came into their own and blossomed into something wonderful, and which of them struggled and made my life miserable in 2024. We'll have a look at how they did, what happened, what lessons I've learned along the way, and what 2025 might hold for these plants. To keep things interesting, I thought we'd do this countdown style. I've chosen 5 plants in each category, so 5 of the best and 5 of the worst, and we're just going to alternate them. We're going to go back and forth to keep it interesting, keep things moving and exciting. So yeah, I have some interesting surprises lined up. Right, let's start with the worst, shall we? I feel like you just have to go, it's good to show the bad and then the good, right? The number 5 plant on my worst list might surprise you, to be honest. Like, even I was surprised when I was going through them and chose this one. But I have to admit, she's had a rough go of 2024, especially the latter half of it. She's just struggled. Enough talking. Let me show you. This is my Alocasia Frydek. You might be saying to yourself, well, this doesn't look that bad. Why is this on the worst list? And it doesn't look that bad, which is why it's number 5 instead of number 1, but it's on the worst list for a reason. Let me take you back to the beginning though, before I don't want to jump ahead. I got this Alocasia Frydek, I think it was like 2 years ago, in the farmer's market in New York for like, I don't remember, $6 or 10, I don't know, something really silly. At the time, variegated Frydeks were going for up, $200, $300, crazy prices. I really wanted one, but I'm not in the business of spending that kind of money on a plant. So I knew for me it was out of reach. I didn't get one. But one day I was walking through the farmer's market in New York, and they had a tray full of the green Alocasia Frydek, Mitchellitziana Frydek, the regular green one. And there was one that had the tiniest dot of white on it. Like, it was the tiniest speck. If you didn't know what you were looking for, you would never think it was variegated. But I saw it and I thought to myself, I bet that bad boy is variegated. So I bought it and brought it home and blasted it with grow light, water, and fertilizer. And lo and behold, slowly but surely, it started putting out more and more variegated leaves. And then it grew a pup that was like proper, that had proper nice creamy variegation full on. So I was like, yeah, we're in business. This plant lived in my bedroom under the grow light in a dark corner of the room, but I had a really good, powerful grow light over it. I was using the Soltec Vita, the Soltec Solutions Vita grow light, and it thrived. It did really well. But eventually, because I'm not in the habit of removing the corms, I ended up with something like 5 or 6 plants in the pot, which was ridiculous, right? It just wasn't going to grow like that. They kept fighting each other for resources. So I knew I had to divide it. Now, dividing these guys can be irritating because sometimes they do well, sometimes they don't. But I was able to divide it successfully, and I had 4, I think, 4 or 5 different plants. I made a video detailing the whole process. You can watch it here. And then one of them I basically distributed them in different locations. I kept 1 or 2, I think I kept 2 of them in my bedroom under that same grow light to grow there again. And then I had like 2, 1 in a corner here and 2 by the window in the living room, and they were fine. One of them had an insane case of spider mites. So I threw it out. I just thought, why bother? You have 4 more. What's the point of trying to rescue it? So I got rid of that one. 2 that were in my bedroom, I gave them to a coworker who, like me, really liked these, and they were still out of reach at that point. So I gave them to my coworker, and I was left with 2, I believe, in the living room. And then lately I've been going through and just reducing plants that I don't need in the space, because I just think I don't know. I used to always have duplicates in case something happened. But alocasias, there's all in my experience, there are usually corms to be found. So I just feel like it's not necessary for me to keep two just for the sake of what if something happens, because there typically is almost always a corm that you can replant. So I decided to stop with the hoarder mentality and just keep one. I mean, I love this plant. It's one of my favorites, but I really don't need more than one, let's be honest. And this is a very big time light hog of a plant. So the real estate in the living room doesn't allow for it. But more importantly, it's also a pest magnet. So when you keep them all over the place, you're increasing the odds that there will be pests in multiple locations. Anyway, so that's how I came to only have one of these. And it has been sitting by the window in the living room. I actually kept the tiniest one of the bunch, the runt of the litter. And here it is today. It's doing okay. It's January here in New York, so we're in the thick of winter. It's currently the coldest it's ever been. Well, not ever. What? It's about the coldest it's been in like a couple of years. So this alocasias do not like the cold. So it's growing a lot more slowly than it otherwise would because, well, it's cold. It doesn't like that. But it's doing okay. These are the roots. I'm not sure if you can see, but it's got some decent roots. Nothing too crazy. Just like, yeah, normal, decent, happy roots. Why is it on my worst list, you're asking? Because every single time I pick this plant up or look at it, and I'm not exaggerating, I literally mean every single time I look at this plant, blink or breathe near it, it has spider mites. Now, I know I can use beneficial bugs. I know, but I don't have them. I'm not using them, so I'm not looking to get into that discussion. Just, I have a lot of plants. I have a lot of experience with a lot of different alocasias, and I can just say that this one always has spider mites. I don't know what it is. It's just a spider mite magnet. I used to not really think that specific plants, I know some are more prone to mites than others, but even within that, I thought, yeah, most alocasias are prone to getting spider mites, right? No, no. This one is the real spider mite magnet of them all. The only saving grace with this plant and these spider mites is because of the variegation. Spider mite damage does not look bad on this one. It tends to only look bad when it gets pretty bad and the edges start crisping or becomes really crazy yellow. That's when it looks bad. But otherwise, honestly, it's fine. Yes, it always it always has spider mites, but it doesn't look bad for it. But oh, look at it right now. Last week it didn't have spider mites. Here I am making this video today, and I didn't even look at the plant before picking it up because I just knew that unfailingly it would have spider mites. And here you are. I don't know if you can see. Let me just focus this so you can see. Here we are. Lo and behold, if you look closely, you will see tiny, tiny bits of webbing. It has spider mites so often that I'm no longer even freaked out to touch it. Like, it's not bad. It's very light webbing here, but I'm gonna have to do something about it. The baby leaf doesn't have webbing yet, I don't think, because it's new. But like, this is why. This is probably also part of why it's growing slowly, right? Winter, but also spider mites, right? But yeah, this plant is on the worst list, the worst behaved, the naughtiest of the naughty list because it just always has spider mites. It should be a star pupil, but it's not. Why? Because it always, always has spider mites. So yeah, this is number 5. And now for the best. Number 5 from the best list is my, drum roll, absolute unit of a silver dollar vine. Xerosicius dangui. Oh my god. Okay, now look at the size. Look at the ridiculous size of this bad boy. Huh? Huh? This is number 5. Now you might be asking yourself, why a plant that clearly doesn't look its absolute best is number 5 on my best of list, and I will get to that. I will show you. First of all, a little background. I bought this plant from one of my favorite plant stores in New York. It's called My Bonita Gardens, and it's way, way out in Queens. I like to go there because it's one of the few places that I feel has really good, healthy plants at great prices. So most of the time, it's either you can buy them at good prices, but the health might be questionable, there might be pests, blah blah blah. Not this place. Like you can tell that the people here love plants. Everything is always in pristine condition, and every plant I've ever bought from them has thrived and been incredible. I got huge my Hoya obovata from them, which went on to grow insane, massive. Anyway, similarly, this one was tiny when I got it from them, and it just blossomed and took off. At first, I was like treating it like any other succulent in my collection. I wasn't giving it that much water. I mean, it had good light, but not that much water. And then I realized that actually it wanted loads of light and loads of water. So this is a very thirsty plant. When I started watering it way more, it completely exploded in growth. I repotted it not very long ago, a couple of months ago. I repotted it, and it has completely outgrown the new pot. And in fact, these roots are so dried out. I know how desperate this plant is for water, and it's crazy because I watered it. I think I watered it yesterday. So it needs yet another repot. This is a very thirsty plant. I'm just going to give it a much bigger pot, and I'm going to try to find it a massive trellis, and I hope that solves the problem because this is ridiculous. Anyway, these, you can see from the leaves that it's parched and it's thirsty. It really needs water, so I'm going to water it after I film this. But it is my top 5 best because listen, this plant is indestructible. I haven't, you can see how desperate it is for water, right? And whenever I water it and fertilize it, what does it do? It pops off new growth. Even though it's not, even though it needs water, it probably needs more nutrients and more substrate to sustain this crazy mass. It still looks spectacular. It just keeps growing. I mean, I need to come up with some kind of sustainable solution to sort it out. But other than that, I mean, what an absolute banger of a plant, right? I'm very proud of this plant, honestly. So this is number 5 on the best list. Now we're back to the worst plants. Worst plant number 4. Before I show you the worst plant number 4, I'll tell you this. This is a plant that I got as a seedling, and I got 4 seedlings at the exact same time. They were all on the shelf in my bedroom, my plant shelf in the bedroom, which has very poor light, to be honest. That's something that I need to resolve. So the conditions for these were not ideal. However, let me show you the others that I got at the same time as this one so you can see. So here's one of them. And no, this is not the worst one. This one has been through some crazy struggles. Again, it was underwatered while I was gone over the summer and led to it getting attacked by mites. So it's got some damage, which I need to cut off some of these leaves, but it's on the mend. It's fine. I don't really know why these leaves have done this. I'm going to assume that it's some kind of winter humidity issue, but this one's done it. This one's done it. But I'm not too bothered because the roots are great. The plant needs a repot. It needs a bigger pot, more substrate. It's quite thirsty, so that will probably combat this. So there's this one. It's not the worst of them, but this is one of them, right, that I got at that time. There's another one from the same batch of seedlings, the same time period. Again, hugely underlit and probably underwatered, but it's a strong plant. It just keeps trucking along, doing fine. Here's a third one. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned, but these are all Anthurium Magnificum ex Forgetii. So these are all Magnificums crossed with Forgetii. So here's this one. See, pretty, doing fine. Again, needs needs a repot actually. It's full. And a pot extender, which will probably jump the leaves in size, but it's pretty, no? You can see, same plant. I have this guy. Drum roll for the absolute huge round of applause for the worst in show, the most awful looking Anthurium Magnificum ex Forgetii in this house. This guy. I don't know what is wrong with this plant. It just looks terrible. Terrible. No spider mites. Strong root system. Probably could do with a repot, quite frankly. And it just looks it just looks horrible. I don't know. What is your problem, buddy? I don't know. But this plant looks awful. Awful. So this is number 4 for the worst plants of 2024. I have some ideas for how I might try to help it in 2025. I'm going to get some new lighting for my plant shelf and catch up on the repots. I'm hoping that when I change the lighting situation, that might help. I don't know, guys. I don't know. But here she is anyway. Number 4 of the worst of the worst. Number 4, best in show, is a plant that I've owned. I think this is my 4th one. I think I've bought 4 different ones. So the first one I bought was from a local plant shop, which has since gone out of business. It did okay for a bit and then it just expired. And I'm not sure if this was down to my newness to the genus. It's an Anthurium. I'm not sure if this was because I didn't know too much about Anthuriums at the time or if I mishandled it, but it didn't make it. I don't know. It just kept getting root rot no matter what I did. The second one I owned, I imported it. It was in my first batch of imports and it did really well. It recovered really well from import, like it rooted. Then I potted it up and then it just, I don't know what I did. It just took a nosedive and it was gone. And then I bought another one. I think I bought another one and I don't think it was it an import? I can't remember. I don't think it was no, yes, I imported a third one. I imported a third one and it was gorgeous. Gorgeous, gorgeous plant. And I think it grew and then it just, I can't remember. I'm not sure what I do to these, but for whatever reason, these are supposed to be when people ask what the easiest Anthurium to start with is, this plant is often mentioned. If you haven't guessed it yet, it's Anthurium Crystallinum. Well, you'll have seen from all these pictures I'm showing, but Anthurium Crystallinum is always recommended as a great starter Anthurium, very easy to care for, and yet, for some reason, I just can't seem to keep one alive. I don't know. So I've had 3. Somehow unalived all of them. I don't know how that came to be. I don't know how that came to be. But then I decided I'm determined to have one. I'm just going to keep trying. If I can grow all these other insane Anthuriums in here, why should a Crystallinum stump me? So I got one. I got it from the Green Escape on Etsy. It was like a tiny, you know how they sell those tiny seedling starter plants. It was really little and it was not like any of the other Crystallinums I've seen. It's like a very light green. And I wasn't sure if it was just because it was young, but I kept it. It was under a grow light in the corner and it was growing, but the leaves were quite light. Like, what's going on? Is it the light? Is it nutrient deficient? Anyway, I repotted it into tree fern soil, of course. And I switched it to a much weaker grow light. So I took it out from under the Soltec Vita and I've just put it under a GE grow light. Now, I don't think the issue is that the other grow light was too powerful. Now that I've kind of understood it a bit more, I think it just needed a repot. Anyway, I've repotted it. In its new position, it's thriving. Let me show you. So here it is. Isn't she cute, my baby? So these are the leaves that were weirdly light. Just odd, right? Just the wrong color, I think, for a crystallinum. But then after the repot, she gave me this one, which was much more along the lines of what I would expect from this plant. So when I saw this one, I knew it was going to be fine. I was like, okay, it's fine. And then it split itself. This is something that crystallinums often do. It sort of split into two different growth points and gave me this one. Started working on this one and this one at the same time. So they're still growing. Well, this one's a bit further ahead. This one's still very, very soft, still growing. I finally have a crystallinum that's growing, and it's got a good root system on it. I mean, it's still, it's still developing. It's not crazy, but the roots are looking good. I see some fur, hair, and some fuzziness on the roots, so I know the plant is loving life, and I'm really thrilled with it. Number 3 on the countdown of the plants that did the worst in 2024 is an anthurium. Now, listen, a lot of these are going to be anthuriums because, well, I have a lot of anthuriums, so there you go. The worst plant, the one is an anthurium, and this I got as also as a seedling and have been growing it for some time, and it has been one of the most fuss-free, no stress plants in here until 2024. I almost don't want to show this one. It is embarrassing. Oh, and I don't know if I'm going to keep it or not, but it looks a mess, like an absolute mess. It is. It looks terrible. Ooh, this is my Anthurium Longistorum. Longistorsum? Longistor. I don't even know what to say about the situation with this plant. It's so embarrassing. Okay. So, obviously, it's dealing with something. There's a mix of things happening here. One, it obviously needs a repot. Two, it probably suffered some kind of pest situation over the summer while I was gone. 3, I have been underwatering it. And 4, it's just like, it's the most gangly and unruly, weirdly growing plant. So it is kind of odd looking at the best of times, but it also, I'll show you a little more closely. It also is very much a climber and is looking for somewhere to put all these, a climber, but it needs somewhere to put all these adventitious roots. So this plant is a mess. I've got 2 options with this bad boy. Either I get rid of it, which I have actually thought about, and I have leaned towards getting rid of it. I'm not sure. Because it is quite an unusual and striking plant when things are good, although things are not good right now. I could also air layer it and then chop it, and that should sort out some of the issues, I guess. I don't know. What should I do? If you know what I should do with this plant, please tell me in the comments below. I am still, it's not an easy get rid of for me. I do still have some sort of attachment to it. Obviously, I'm going to cut off all these disgusting leaves, but yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do with this plant. I'm undecided. And now for best plant number 3. This one is notorious for being difficult, but I find her to be a joy, a delight to grow. So I got her as a seedling. Here she is, my little baby tiny seedling, Anthurium Warocqueanum. I imported her. She was yay high, very tiny, and acclimated her in water for a little bit, for like 48 hours or whatever, potted her up, and off she went. Now I was growing her in my grow tent, and she was pristine, just the most perfect plant, going from strength to strength, doing really, really well. And she got a bunch of leaves. Here she is looking very stunning. Then over the summer, and I'm sure we're all tired of hearing about this now, but over the summer I went to Europe and I had a plant sitter who did not do what she was paid to do and did not water half the plants, definitely didn't water anything that was in the grow tent. So Anthurium Warocqueanum spent 3 weeks with no water, zero water. Now, if you know anything about the Warocqueanum, you know that's a recipe for disaster because it's a very thirsty plant. Luckily, it was in the grow tent, which does a really good job of keeping the humidity high. So even though it suffered, if it was out in open air, it almost certainly would not have made it. Thanks to the tent, it did. It survived. It did okay, but the leaves were very, very damaged. I took this opportunity to pull it out of the tent, damage and all, because it was getting too big. I just have a tiny, tiny grow tent. Here she is. Now you might be seeing this and wondering why she's on the third best list, because obviously she's not perfect. She's not pristine. If I turn it around, you can see just how much damage the leaves suffered while I was away. So these were perfect before I left and they were destroyed in my absence. But knowing that the plant had been decimated, I decided to use the opportunity to pull it out of the grow tent because, again, like I said, this is a very large plant. It can't live in a grow tent indefinitely. So I took the opportunity to pull it out and have it grow in my open apartment in the ambient humidity. Now, in New York City, at least in my apartment, winters are pretty cold, and in my apartment, humidity gets as low as 20 in winter, sometimes even lower. It typically hovers in the 20s for most of the winter. And even in summer, because we have the air conditioning on, I would say it tends to be around 50, somewhere between 40 and 50. So I know that those can be challenging conditions for queen anthuriums. I think 40, anything above 40 is okay. But when you get lower than that, it can be tricky. However, I must say, I pulled it out and look at this is the first leaf that it grew when I pulled it out. Obviously, this leaf is massive. There's a lot of damage, but it is big. So I think she liked the increased airflow and it has good light, but the leaves needed to adjust to the conditions. Now, like I said, humidity in here is extremely low right now. And look at the newest leaf. It's just about hardening. It's still a bit soft, but I think this is it. I think it's hardening off. It's not perfect, but almost, right? Almost. So it's got a little bit of mechanical damage from unfurling in such low humidity, and it's adjusting to this type of environment. I've taken some measures I've wrapped the moss pole in cling film or saran wrap, as you guys would say, to try to help it retain some moisture, and that does seem to be helping quite a bit actually. But yeah, I'm very happy with how she's growing, and my hope is that the longer she stays out here, the easier she finds it to keep putting out these big, long, beautiful leaves. And eventually, I mean, she's a tough plant, so I know that eventually the leaves will look better. And I'm gonna cut off some of these older ones that don't look so good. I'm just giving the plant. I'm just reluctant to do that right now because I didn't want to shock it. But I probably will be doing that pretty soon. So, number 3 on the best of 2024, because she surprised me in a really good way by bouncing back from horrible conditions to actually come out here and be tough as nails and hang with the best of them. Time for worst plant number 2. And for this one, basically I went from a dream to a nightmare. Here I am being so dramatic. This plant was basically my dream plant, right? I wanted it for the longest time. I looked at other people's Instagrams like Katie Ann Plants and people like that, and they had the most beautiful variegated Alocasia poly. And I thought, I desperately, desperately want one of these. Like, how beautiful, right? So I was on the lookout for them, but gosh, again, these are so pricey. And seeing what happened with pricing on variegated Frydek, I was very reluctant to part with any large sum of money for one of these. So when a tiny one popped up on the Green Escape, I bought it. It's pink, variegated poly, small. It was not a bambino, it was a poly, and I thought, okay, great. So I put it in my grow tent, babied it. Ugh. You know, polys are gonna poly. So it did okay, but over time, this is what happened to it. Basically, it started reverting. So here is, it now has two leaves, and believe it or not, this is the more recent one. I don't know why it's putting out a smaller leaf. Very weird. It's lost basically all its variegation, so fantastic. Basically the most expensive green poly out there. Really annoying. There's like a tiny dot of variegation on this. I want to guess that maybe this is one that I need to put under a grow light. Maybe it will do better instead of natural light. I don't know. I'm reluctant to change anything until, I mean, it's winter. You don't want to do too much in winter. They go dormant. The alocasias, you know. So I'm kind of tempted to just leave it alone, to be honest, and just let it be until spring. And then in spring, I will repot it, and hopefully the warmth and the light of spring will encourage it to bounce back and variegate again. I don't know. I mean, if it doesn't, it doesn't, right? Who cares? But she is on my naughty list because if I wanted a green poly, I would have gotten one. I didn't buy a variegated poly only for it to turn green. How irritating. So, number two of the best. It is another Anthurium. Listen, Anthuriums are awesome. They behave well. Like, everybody else needs to take notes. This Anthurium I got as a seedling, another import from Ecuagenera actually. And it was teeny weeny. Here it is. And it just has never given me problems. Literally, ever. I potted it, I acclimated it in water, potted it into tree friend soil, and boom, she was off to the races and has never had a bad day since. I put her on the plant shelf in my bedroom where she was fine for quite some time, but then she outgrew that spot. The light there isn't very good. I brought her out into the main living room. You want to see what she looks like now? I'm sorry. Was something said? Look at her. She is probably, I don't know. She's favorite number two, but honestly, it was very close between her and number one because, like, she's stunning, no? Like, so some of these leaves, these are damaged from when she was in the bedroom. She was touching the tiny grow light at the top of the shelf, and this was happening, which is why I pulled her out into the living room, and she's been happy as Larry ever since. This was her first living room leaf, and then, well, no, she was working on this one already. This was already growing when she came into the living room, so you see a little grow light damage. And then as soon as she came out here, where of course there's more light, boom, blah, blah. Look at that. What a banger, no? What an absolute banger. I just find her to be so impressive. It's time for the number one worst of the worst plant in my collection. Like, this plant, I barely have words for how horrible this plant has been to me this year. This is actually one that I've had since it was a tiny 4-inch plant. I bought it 2, maybe 3 years ago from Gabriella Plants. Tiny, right? It's a ficus. Did you guess by now? Ficus Umbellata. So This plant, I mean, you have seen it many times on my page, right? It's not very common here in the U.S. It's one of, I think, three different types of ficuses that I have in the house, and uh, it's not a difficult plant to grow, but it's not really the best house plant in that it needs a lot of light and a lot of water, which is fine if you live in, I don't know, Texas, but in New York City, that's tricky, right? You know, it lives in, a corner in my apartment, which it has a massive grow light, and that's totally fine. But my biggest issue with this plant is, it always has spider mites. It always has spider. I can't. I find it maddening. It always has spider mites. It's one of these plants that, like, when you repot it, it drops its leaves. Blah blah blah. It's very thirsty. I water it. You could water this plant every day and not overwater it. I water it all the time. Give it lots of light. It grows, but it always has spider mites, and I'm just fed up of it. You know, I'm even talking too much. Let me show you what this plant looks like right now. Here she is. So let me show you one part of the problem. As you can see, she's in a massive pot, and yet look at the roots. You know why? This is a tree, an enormous tree, and it's just not like it's just not practical for me to keep growing this plant in here. But even more frustrating is that she always, I said she always has spider mites, 24/7 spider mites. Here you can see she's been dropping all her leaves because I probably haven't watered her enough in my frustration. Ugh, I've had enough of her. Can you tell I've had enough of her? She's so annoying. So I've debated many things, like should I chop it and keep it? But it doesn't even look nice anymore, you know? Because it's so tall, it's desperate for more light, you know. It wants to be outside. I feel really bad. So I think this plant has to go. I'm gonna try to see if I can find someone who wants it. But of course, again, I'll treat it for spider mites, but I'm done with it. I was trying to hold off till the summer, see if I would put it outside in my building's courtyard and see what it could do. But you know, you've got to be careful with these. Yeah, I don't want it to grow roots into the ground and then mess with the building's foundations. I'm not going to be responsible for that. So I'll see if anyone wants it, but if not, you know, just going to the compost bin. Ficus Umbellata. We had a good run, but I'm sick of your spider mite infestations, and I'm done with you. For the pièce de résistance, the top, number one. Oh my lord. Look at her. So this is the newest leaf. It's actually still very soft, so it's still growing. I'll leave it to do its thing. And these are the ones before that. And then it has these ones. So it's probably an average of a leaf every 2 months, maybe. I did leave this. It needed a repot, and I just didn't repot it. I left it for ages. So it probably would have way more leaves than now if I had been on top of its repotting needs. But I recently gave it this giant pot, which it's still filling up with roots. And even though it's doing that, it still decided to give me this big boy. So for that, she wins best in show. The Anthurium Veitchii is the number one, top of the pops, and the plant whose performance I'm the most proud of in 2024. And let me tell you, if this is what she's doing in 2024, and she's working her way to fill this pot with all those juicy roots, just imagine what she's going to do for me in 2025. Just imagine. So I'm so proud of this one. So, what have I learned from this little exercise? Honestly, life is too short to deal with plants that you don't love. When I'm done with them, I'm just going to remove them. Like, if I don't like them, if I fall out of love, then I will rehome them. I will sell them. I will give them away to someone who wants them. But what I won't do is continue to keep them in the space and resent the time and effort and care that goes into them. 2025 is all about just enjoying my plants and having ease in my plant care journey, keeping plants that make me happy and not just keeping them because I happened to buy them. Some of these plants have been just chugging along and then all of a sudden, boom, they're absolute showstoppers. It's a real lesson in the power of patience and just kind of enjoying the journey because every stage is different. Every stage is completely different. And they are constantly evolving just as I'm evolving. My love for them is evolving. It's all one big evolutionary journey, and I absolutely, absolutely love that.